Hey guys, I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit more of a rundown on domain because it looks like that was kind of an area of concern on the checkpoint that we did. So one thing that you have to remember about a function is that x values represent your input and they're also called your domain. Okay? Y values are your output and they are called your range. So when a question is asking you what is the domain, they're asking you what inputs or what x values make sense in the context of the problem that we're looking at. So in this situation, we're looking at making a box, cutting corners out of a sheet of paper so that we can fold the sides up and make a little box out of it. So if we look at the inputs, so the input in this case would be the side length of the square cutout. This is our x value. So when it's asking you what's the domain for this problem, it's asking you what size of square can we cut out? What makes sense for the size of the square that we can cut out? So if you think about it, anything bigger than 0 would make sense. Because if you cut out 0 inches, you can't fold up any sides to make the box. You would just have the bottom of the box. So anything bigger than that though, and you can fold those sides up to create a box. And likewise, if you look here at 4.5, if we start out with an 8.5 inch wide sheet of paper, we can't subtract 4.5 inches twice from that piece of paper because remember, we're cutting 2 corners out. We're cutting a corner out here and we're cutting a corner out here. So I can't cut 4.5 inches wide this way and 4.5 inches wide this way because then I would just be cutting off the whole thing. And you can see that right here because the width of that box would then actually be negative because you've taken out 9 inches when you only have 8.5 to cut. So in this case, you can see that anything between 0 and 4, or actually what's halfway in between 4 and 4.5, would really make sense because those are the values that are going to give us positive lengths, positive widths, positive heights, and positive volumes. So the way that we would write the domain for this one is we're going to use interval notation. It's going to sometimes look like an ordered pair, but what we're going to say is that if it's a curved line, it's kind of like this symbol right here. It doesn't include the number, and neither does a curved bracket. So we can do anything that's above 0, and we can do anything that is less than 4.25. And again, 4.25, and we're not going to put a square bracket on this one. So the equivalent of a square bracket would be this symbol right here. So either of these would make sure that we include that endpoint. So if we change the problem, and you can also kind of see this from the graph. So when you look at the graph here, if we were to kind of draw in this line right here, you kind of see where this graph makes sense and where it doesn't make sense. So on our x-axis, that's the side length of the square. So that's how big the square side is. The y value represents our volume. So in this context, only the numbers, only the values in the first quadrant make sense because this is where our volume is positive and it's also where the side length of the square is positive. So anything in the second, third, and fourth quadrant wouldn't really make sense. But we're only looking at the x value when we're trying to figure out what our domain is. And we want our domain to be positive and we want it to make our volume be positive. So if we're looking at the domain here, again, you can see we're going to be going from 0 to this 4.25 over here. So on the graph, when it's asking you for your domain, you're only looking at that x value. You're not looking at the y, because that's your output, that's your range. You're only looking at the x value, that's your domain. Okay, so again, if we look at this is a little bit better graph. This is still the volume. You can see a little bit better on this one. Here is the domain for this problem, all along here, okay? Again, this is our volume. This one is our square. So we can only use the values of x that give us a positive volume and that give us a positive side length. So once we get past this point right here, now our volume is negative. This value of x doesn't make sense anymore. So again, we have that 0 to 4.25. Domain is something that students typically struggle with, so don't feel bad, you're not alone. But if you have questions, please make sure that you address them with me. Email, come in. I have 4th, 6th, and 7th hour off. So if you need something, please let me know.